Welcome to Talent Unfiltered. Located at the intersection of innovation and all things talent. Talent Unfiltered is presented by HireWorks. HireWorks, talent forward. Now, here is your host, Ron Gauthier.
It is Monday, August 10th, 2020. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talent Unfiltered, presented by HireWorks. I am Ron Gauthier, coming to you, as usual, from Chicago, Illinois. I hope that you are all safe, sound, and healthy wherever you may be. After a cool spell here in the area last week, summer weather has returned. And we expect it to get much warmer over the coming days. We have an absolutely great show coming up for you today. Jim Taylor, who is the CEO and founder of an organization called Launchways, will be joining us. Launchways focuses on helping organizations build scalable HR structures that aid in payroll, in benefits, insurance, and a whole host of other services. I met Jim a couple of years ago at an event. And have gotten to know him a little bit over the last couple of years. He is a very, very nice, extremely talented guy. We recently did a panel discussion together with Hacking HR, which, as many of you know, is the group I'm involved with. Jim moderated that panel, and it was all about a new era in employee wellness. And I believe that has been that area of employee wellness, of perks, of benefits, has potentially been accelerated in new directions based on what is going on with the pandemic and so many other things in our society today. Jim and I are going to talk about that and so much more. Now, before we get started, I want to remind you that you can connect with the show on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. The show is available on Spotify, Buzzsprout, and Soundcloud, and there is a video version, which some of you are watching right now on YouTube. All you need to do is go to any one of those platforms, search Talent Unfiltered, and you will find us there. You can also email the show if you like at showinfo@talentunfiltered.com, and keep those emails coming. We love to hear from you. We get plenty of emails every week, and we're going to have some topics and guests in coming weeks that some of you have suggested to us. The links to our social media and all of our platforms are in the description section down below. And if you dig what we do, then like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice, and turn on the notification buttons so you don't miss any new content coming from us. All right, let's get to it. As I mentioned, Jim Taylor, CEO and founder of Launchways, is here. He is a benefits expert, someone that is squarely focused on the future of employee benefits and how companies can compete for talent by offering the right mix of perks, support, and wellness programs for their employees. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for taking time to join us here today. How are you, my friend?
Ron, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. What's going on with you? How you doing today?
Doing well. I think the time of COVID is kind of a crapshoot. On one day you can be doing well, and on another day maybe not so good, because there's just so much uncertainty in our life. And it's not just COVID; it's social unrest. It's a lot of different things, right? It's the economy, it's unemployment, and I just think it's a weird time in our country. But for the most part, I think I'm good. I know you have a family, you have young daughters. How are you guys handling this particular time in our nation's history?
Well, that's a pretty damn loaded question, Ron, considering it's 2020. But
Sure.
like the reality is one foot in front of the other,
Sure.
or for the most part. So just the big thing we're tackling right now, family wise, is just working through the decisions that need to happen as it relates to school. So,
Sure.
we recently made the decision to keep our children at home, and had the opportunity to make that decision, which we're very fortunate to do. And
Sure.
just now kind of backfilling like anything entrepreneurially, now that the decision's been made, okay, now that we made that decision, how do we actually make sure so that it works and everybody stays, happy, healthy, and sane. So
Yeah.
that's personalized. That's what we're tackling right now, but doing okay.
And it's, when you have kids young like that, it is always a challenge, because now home is not just work, but it's school, it's the playground, it's your office, it's your wife's office, it's everybody's, area, and getting used to that dynamic has got to be a little challenging.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're used to it because at least we were able to get like last spring as practice or spring training, whatever you want to call it. And I think
Sure.
just kind of leaning into it now, it's more about now that the realities in front of us are that we don't know what 6 months from now is going to look like. How, if this is what it's going to be like for the next year, how do we make sure that this is productive for everybody? How do we make sure that learning and all these important things come on, and more just embracing this as an opportunity to get closer as a family, and all these different things that we conceptually work on every single day, but depending on the day of the week and depending on what's going on, obviously can get
Yeah.
can get interesting for sure.
And it's kind of funny because I think depending on where you are generationally and what your home life is like is a huge determining factor or factors in how you perceive what is happening
Yep.
right now. I think for those in our audience who have young children, school age children, um, you know, they're going to resonate. That what you're talking about is going to resonate with them. Those decisions are tough because the jury's still out about how, I think scientifically, in some ways, the jury is still out about how COVID affects children.
Yeah.
But you do see signs that there are hazards to them, and we're finding now that 9 to 10 to 11-year-old age group, they transmit the virus just as well as an adult.
Yeah,
Um,
for
and
sure.
so I don't envy your decisions, my friend, but I do thank you for taking time to hang out with me
My
today.
pleasure.
Okay,
My
so
pleasure.
let's jump right into it. So you and I were both part of a panel. I'm the Chicago chapter lead for an organization called Hacking HR, and you
Yep.
and I have gotten to know each other through HR Hot Seat.
Hmm.
And through Hacking HR, but recently we had the opportunity to
Yeah.
work together a little bit when you moderated a panel for the Chicago chapter online event last month. And for those of you in the audience who are not familiar with Hacking HR, I would suggest you get out, check it out. It is an awesome organization. You can find them online at hackinghr.io. There are chapters in every city around the country, around the world for that matter. But what I wanted to talk about, Jim, was you guys had a panel where it was titled "A New Era of Employee Well-Being."
Sure.
And I think your background lends itself to being somewhat of an expert in this area. And you and your panelists discussed health and well being in this time of the COVID crisis and beyond. Your company, Launchways, focuses on helping organizations build scalable HR benefits, insurance programs in that SMB space.
Hmm.
And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to walk me through how you think employee wellness programs are going to be part of the perks that attract employees as we come out on the other side of this, because unemployment is upside down right now. We all know that, which is tragic for so many people. So many people are struggling, but from a business perspective, we know that these things tend to be cyclical, and at some point it will end. But I think what employees expect on the back end of that is going to be different. And I'd like you to spend a little time talking about that.
Yeah. So Ron, you bring up a couple good points, and thanks for asking. I think to a large degree, it's not just what employees expect, but it's also like from an employer standpoint, like what their responsibility is. And so like I think about, I mean, people often ask me like, why are you qualified to really talk about any of this stuff? And the most common answer is that, when I decided to start my first company, it was because I thought I could start a company and create a better environment for anybody than I had seen, and really have used that as just general, like a driving force for me to, as anywhere I've gone and, been fortunate enough to lead. In today's context, I think just the concept of wellness and benefits and the holistic view of an employee in a relationship just got, whatever phrase you want to use, 10x more real,
Mm-hmm.
because every single person is dealing with things that they've never had to deal with before. You've got people like myself that are extremely social beings who thrive on having a variety of different challenges and interactions with people throughout the day. And there are things that are literally happening to me as a person who's experiencing this well, that some days I deal with it very well, and other days it's just a challenge. So I think it's really twofold. The one, it's really forcing employers to take a look and say, okay, this we really have an important part in my employees' well-being, because in many cases, because of the isolation, because of the things, the happy hour, the engagement, the subscription to meditation that you're providing as part of a perk or benefit, this might be one of the, if not the only social outlet that people have as they're practicing, like, self-imposed quarantine and social
Hmm.
distancing and all that stuff. So
Sure.
the role of the employer is changing, and it's changing dramatically, and it's changing quickly. And I think from, thinking about the topic, it's more accelerating the things that we've already seen from a trend standpoint of being able to create an experience anywhere for employees that matters, realizing that total well-being is critical, and that's not just work-life quote unquote balance, or quote unquote, however you want to use it. It's the financial components of it, it's the mental components of it, it's the physical components. And this is something that the employers that are really being thoughtful about this and are really thinking about how to address this are just going to have a tremendous advantage, as always, in regards to attracting talent. With unemployment rates where they are, you are going to see shifts on a talent continuing to find the best possible place to work. And I think it's an opportunity that organizations in general just need to embrace, is to be thinking about this concept of, holistic total wellness for their
Sure.
staff.
Sure. And, there's so many things in our society that were front and center. Student debt was one of the things that we talked about. We'll get to that in just a second. But that's one of the things that's been front and center and stressful for a lot of people who are in the millennial generation, and I think Gen Z as well.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think this time presents a unique opportunity for both companies and individuals to pivot and retool their thinking about what matters. And I think it's my belief, if I put on my futurist hat here, that there will be an acceleration toward um, an acceptance of gig style workers
Yeah.
on the part of organizations.
Hmm.
And there will be an acceptance of individuals or there'll be more acceptance by individuals to not be afraid of that gig style work. And
Yeah.
I think it could be interesting. I think it will be challenging to create benefits programs that address some of the things that corporations will, and that may be what pushes people to kind of remain on a more traditional path. I mentioned student debt there, and to me, and I'm really interested to get your take on this because it was such a hot button
Right.
topic in the political discourse. You look at the generation that's currently out there; they have fewer prospects, higher student debt. They have more debt than any generation that came before them, particularly the millennials.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder, I know there are some organizations out there who are beginning to address this in terms of debt forgiveness and help. Um, but give me some specifics on how companies are helping employees manage and work through this debt if they're using it as a perk to be able to find valuable talent out there. And also, do you think that candidates will trade upfront dollars in salary for the opportunity to access relief or relief programs from their employers?
So three things I want to pull out of what you just said was, first, just in
There
regards
was
to,
only three. I thought there'd be like seven or eight because it was one of my usual compound questions that asks like five things instead of just one. So
exactly. But there was one in particular that I thought early on that was really, really important. And you're right, there was probably 10. Dude, let's just give me. But the first was just the idea of workforce dynamics changing in regards to acceptance of gig workers. I mean, there are, technology companies, one famously that just got acquired yesterday, called Sitter City, which is one of the oldest tech companies in Chicago, been around since 2000, about having a company that is based on and really having two communities, well, really one community, but one that consists of both, internal W-2 employees, and then a larger one that consists of gig economy, style
Mhm.
workers. And so what we've seen from a trend is that this was like a major issue that a lot of the major technology platforms that companies operate these days were not addressing. And we have seen a dramatic shift to say, hey, this is normal, and businesses are now going to be created on these platforms where there is a combination of both of these, and we have to be able to interact and also treat with respect people that are W-2 employees as well as 1099s, because they matter. They're part of our brand. They're part of our overall experience. And whereas, kind of in the past, if you think of like old school mentality, is that owners or people would try to think through, how can I have this person be a 1099 so I get them off my book so I don't have to pay tax? And now people are thinking is, there is real talent in a gig style, and I want to be able to incorporate this. So that's the first trend that we've seen, is that there are platforms. If you're building an HR technology platform today, it's built with something that incorporates that into the model. We've seen some really good dramatic examples, like Rippling, which is one of our partners, which just raised 145 million, is the next unicorn. It's Parker Conrad's follow up to Zenefits. They do that integration really well. And a lot of our customers that have a gig economy component to what they do, or that's part of their community, they love the platform because it allows people within the organization that have different, classifications from an employment standpoint, be able to work together and communicate together, which I think is really important.
Please don't forget anything else that you were going to mention, but you brought something up there that if I don't bring it up, I'm going to
Yeah.
forget. You talk about classifications and employees, and one of the reasons in my organization, we don't employ people in a 1099 environment because there's some tax implications for our clients if we do that. So I think I'd love to get your take on this thing. I think there are two things that the gig economy is going to have to address. Number one, not everybody is going to want to deal with the headaches of filing their own taxes. So how do we do that in a way? And then how do we make W-2 contractor, W-2 hourly employees, short-term people, how do we create benefits programs either in the marketplace or wherever that allow them to have affordable health care, right?
Yep. So it is, and it's about total, again, going back to total wellness and thinking about bringing those people into the community. So there are a lot of tools that have hopped up to help someone who is like let's just say, example, the way they're making it in the world is, I'm an Uber driver. I work for Sitter City, and I also work for this, and I need something to tie together. There are a lot of solutions out there now that help like thoughtfully tie this together. I will say on the benefit side, that is something that has been a strength for us, is figuring out, okay, when we look at all the different things that exist outside of healthcare, because the way that the laws are constructed right now, like you don't have the ability to offer, for the most part, benefits to independent contractors unless you're going to offer them to all, and there's restrictions that the insurance carriers have. But what I think will happen, in my prediction in regards to the next 4 years, is we'll see a lot of those things rolled back. Similar, if you think about like with the CARES Act and all the things that happened as it related to COVID, 1099 workers had never been covered in the history of since, and then all of a sudden they were.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that shined a light on the percentage of the population that this affects and can affect, and then also going back to like that total responsibility. So employers, again, are not only thinking about, how do I make that experience for everybody to be a part of the community, but how can we do perk programs, how can we offer standalone benefits that are going to be meaningful to them so that we can help retain them. And I think what will happen is you'll start to see the governors that exist legally from a tax perspective kind of be unhinged, and you will see in the future scenarios where you'll be able to provide alternatives, as I just think that's in general the trend is going.
That's interesting to me because I've always believed that the big holdup in gig economy actually moving forward at a much more rapid pace was really twofold. One, it was institutional, to get employers to get their head around that I have a thing that I need to get done, and that is more suited to a temporary gig style employee. I think that's first lever that needs to be pulled in order to change that. And the second one is that there's never been a mechanism to allow someone to have the security that they have in a permanent job, because I think once you cross that hurdle of dealing with taxes and benefits that are maybe not as good but comparable, at least in terms of healthcare, that you're going to see a lot more people gravitate to that. So getting back to our question, so the student debt thing, are companies using that as a perk to attract talent, number one, and number two, are candidates, do you think, going to be willing to trade those upfront dollars, the upfront dollars in terms of salary, to access that kind of relief because of its long-term benefit to them?
So to answer your question directly, sure, we're still seeing employers do, offer debt relief, and there's a number of different tools that you can access to be able to do that in a thoughtful way. But just like anything, when the economy goes to the part where it is, where unemployment is such significantly higher than it was, I mean, we've completely seen a reversal, as I'm sure you've seen on your end as well, where things are being peeled back, and employers are looking at this as an opportunity to not have as much money come out of their pocket as it relates to signing
Sure,
bonuses, things like that. At the end
sure.
of the day, the top talent is still going to be able to demand what they can get in the market, and those skill positions are always going to be valuable. But I think you were seeing more of an adaptation around that on more of a global scale as opposed to just for top tier talent. I just think you'll see that continue to tighten up. I think you'll continue to see different peel backs of different benefits
Hmm.
as it relates to things that, because employers have to, as they've gone through this, look at their just the way that they look at total compensation, right? Total compensation is not just salary, it's baked in benefits, it's signing bonuses, it's all of these other things that make up the way that they structure their financial models. So, since everybody in the universe has had to take a really hard look at their financial model in the
Yep.
last 6 months, I think many companies did. We saw a lot of like just overall like reductions, or we're going to eliminate the 401k match.
Hmm.
I saw some companies do extreme, obviously, layoffs or furloughs, or temporary reductions of salaries for periods of time, or non-essential sales related bonuses eliminated, and all those different things. And I think that was kind of the first wave, and I think most companies are comfortable that they were able to get through this next phase. But what we're going to see more going into this budget season, and I think this is going to be one of the hardest budget seasons for organizations, as they try to align the interest of the overall goals of the organization, sound financial principles, and ultimately what can attract and retain the best possible talent. They're going to have to look at their models and make sure that they work, because all these things we're talking about, the benefits, they don't mean anything if the company can't be viable long term in regards to its financial economic state.
Yeah, but here's what I would argue. I would argue that eventually, um, when you look at unemployment, when you look at what happened prior to COVID, let's go back to the end of last year. If you
Sure.
were a Ruby developer at the end of last year, you have not taken a significant cut in pay. You may have had a temporary cut in pay to keep your job, but ultimately,
Yeah.
there are certain skill sets, there are certain,
Yeah.
particularly technology, that aren't going to be affected by this.
Absolutely.
There are jobs where now we have an influx of people,
Yep.
but unemployment will normalize. And in the long term, you still have the same challenges that you do today. And I think that,
Absolutely.
you're going to see, you mentioned sales. You're going to see salespeople. I think the trend is going to be for them to be much more highly leveraged until this takes off. And I think service companies are going to be asked, I know we're being asked to have some skin in the game in terms of, pay for performance. It's no more, and no longer is it just an hourly rate and an advisory. Now there's a performance component, which I'm fine with because that's how I grew up in the business. But,
Sure.
but it's an interesting time. And I'm appreciating your perspective on this. So when you think about things in this vein from the vantage point of a small business owner. And you look at kind of the uncertainty that we've gone through. How have you, as a small business owner, altered your approach to how you're dealing with your teams, how you're thinking about hiring? Did you guys have, a contingency plan in place, or was this more reacting in real time to what conditions were visible on the ground?
That's a great question. So I think first, I'm very fortunate where, although we run it like a very closely knit small business, we're backed by a private equity firm out of New York. So I don't carry the same responsibility that I did when I bootstrapped the business to start. So I'm very fortunate in that regard as my partner. Um, so I guess a couple things. One, for us, all the things that we were doing prior to COVID to allow ourselves to be ready for the things that we think are eventual, which is a completely virtual workforce, universal health care, and some of the more just future thinking things. We were probably, I'd say, 70% of the way there. And all this did was really force to us accelerate some of the things that we were already doing and do them better and take a hard look. So I think, knock on wood, we're really fortunate. From a hiring outlook, we've added 3 people since, locally here since COVID had started,
Nice.
and getting ready to, send out a couple of additional offers. So I think we're very fortunate to be in a position where just the way our business model is structured,
Mhm.
it's we have a lot of opportunities to acquire new customers who are open to looking at things differently, and that's created just a tremendous amount of opportunity. So some of the things that we were really doing well that may have been not as important pre-COVID really started to do that. And then also, we made a commitment to our customers that, even if the amount of requests like that our HR team has to take for customer requests because people need more handholding in regard to figuring out the return to work program, or our benefits team has to do more work figuring out how FFCRA applies to the benefits renewal. Where we need to do that for our customers, otherwise they won't become our customers. So we took the stance that we were going to go long and not make any dramatic shifts in regards to workforce. And fortunately, just some of the things that we were doing allowed us to continue to grow, and we've been actually be able to find some new opportunities and open up a presence in Texas, which was something that we had kind of on our roadmap for last year, but it just
Nice.
now it's happening this year, and things are moving along well. So
That's outstanding. You hear, I hear so many people who get kind of down in the mouth about what's happening from a business perspective, and I don't want to minimize anything that anybody's going through. I think it is tragic,
yeah,
even though it was self-inflicted. As a nation, we made the decision to stop where we were. Probably in hindsight, maybe exactly the right decision. History will tell. History will prove whether
yeah,
this was right or wrong. But ultimately, it's so nice to hear an optimistic approach,
yeah.
because I think people forget.
Well, real quick, let me give one. Let me give one. A counterpoint to that. So as much as we've been fortunate in that regard, I mean, we are also, from a staff standpoint and managing, mental well-being, my staff is working yeoman's hours as it
Mhm.
relates to being able to do that. I'd say the success we're having, we're probably working twice as hard to have the same level of success that we would have as a result of it. And I think just the hardest thing for me personally about this, because I definitely want to acknowledge, um, I've never had to have a continual set of more challenging conversations with the leaders and organizations than I have, because they are, our customers are under the gun and they're depending on us to be there for them. So it's kind of what we signed up for, you know?
Hmm. Sure, sure. I guess where I was heading with it, and it's I think you're fortunate to have to have a good team. I feel like I have
Yeah.
a good supporting environment at my organization as well. But I do agree with you. I think customers are responding and much differently now. The dynamic has changed. We used to talk about this on a regular basis. In fact, I had this conversation this morning that I've always felt from a service offering standpoint, that my company was ahead of the curve. The problem now that we have is that we operate on a different curve than we did 6 months ago.
Right.
And it's forced everybody to pivot. I mean, think about it. The bulk of business gets done this way now. There are
Yeah.
very few in-person meetings.
Yes, sir.
Um, and these meetings, Zoom meetings, are just unbelievably stressful. They're tiring. They're exhausting because there's no energy to pick up from the other person. Now, if you're like me and you're a ham, these work fine. I'm fine with, being on camera and talking to clients, but not
Yeah.
everybody feels comfortable with that, right?
For sure.
And it's just a different world, I think. And I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing well. I do understand the working harder, and I think this environment, because we're at home. I think we talked about this during the event that you moderated. It's very easy to fall into that I'm working more hours because I walk out of the kitchen with coffee into my office, right? And I'm
Right.
right there. There's no travel time in either direction. So great points, Jim. I really appreciate your perspective on that. So when you look forward
Yep.
into next year, because at some point we are going to go back to work. We are going to be back in the office. I don't think it'll ever be I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was before. But what do you think work life might look like, and how will what we've gone through alter how companies and candidates perceive or think about benefits and perks?
Well, I think work from anywhere is real, and the companies that can do that well are ultimately going to have additional options, right? So I think just as you brought up a couple things, but a year from now, I reasonably am sitting here today thinking about that we have to do our plan for the next 18 to 24 months, assuming that there's going to be similar, and then ultimately in the event that things go back to quote unquote, normal the way they before, and we have the ability, we've now had enough time to really sit back and think, do we want to go? What parts that we were doing before were not working, and what are the things that we're now better at, and really align on those. And I think just internally, we have aligned on what those are. So thinking about work from anywhere, removing geographic restrictions for finding the best talent, making sure processes and things like that were cleaned up, being able to onboard an employee remotely, really being thoughtful about the experience the employees have as it relates to the way they interact with each other, the way they interact with technology. That's going to be more important than ever. And I think foundationally, the organizations that are really thinking about that as they're, in damage control mode, panic mode, that are really thinking about, okay, this is an opportunity to reinvent my brand. This is an opportunity to reinvent the company, are the ones that are going to come out on top and going to be stronger.
Yeah, it's just such a different world that we play in today. I see so many organizations changing and reevaluating what they've done, whether that's, are the meetings that I have every day, are those valuable? Do I need as large a footprint, a physical space footprint as I did before?
Yep.
And we talk all the time in our business because we have a software development portion of our organization, and then we have the talent advisory piece of the business. And we talk all the time about employees in tertiary markets.
Sure.
And what's interesting to me is there are very few major cities right now where people are in the office full time.
Right.
And yet, when you see companies advertising for contract resources, or you talk to someone about, hey, I noticed you need some, it looks like you're hiring, you have some bandwidth challenges. How would you feel about having one of our consultants be a part of what you're doing? Oh, that would be great. Can they be here in our office? I'm like, well, nobody's in an office full time now. And it just leads me to believe that that's the one thing that we're really going to have to work as providers to overcome and to educate about, because
Yeah.
I think that whole idea is so ingrained in how people run their business and how they build their business, so that they have to be right there.
Yeah.
Um, so I got a couple of minutes here left, and I want to just touch on a couple of things. So um, when you think about companies, because you're inside HR teams all the time,
Yep.
particularly early stage companies, some established companies out there as well, how do you see companies reimagining their people teams and the services that they provide internally as a result of everything that we've had to deal with in 2020? And that's, the George Floyd issue, the social unrest, the pandemic. What are the changes you're seeing organizations beginning to roll out as a response to that?
Um, so I think that there's a lot of getting ready across the board for what the future is going to look like. I mean, obviously there was a tremendous amount of outpouring with the deaths of George Floyd, and
Mhm.
the all the things that have happened, and it's been really great to see the way that the overall community has responded. And I'll say specifically, locally Chicago tech community, which is a big part of what we serve. Um, in regards to your question about the HR function in general, it still tends to be something that a lot of companies, I think, say is critically important. In this pandemic is forcing them to actually prove that it's important, because the idea, it's not as easy to keep a workforce engaged. If you think about just typical, again, going back to growth stage technology based companies, where you've got these offices where people come and it's like going to Disneyland and it's amazing, and all of these different things happen, it is really tough to keep a workforce engaged remotely. And I think the ones that are doing that well and realizing how much work it takes to do that are the ones that are going to do well. So we're seeing a lot of organizations take things seriously that they didn't as before. So, for example, sometimes we go into companies and help them kind of like overall evaluate their process, the way that they're doing things, the way they're interacting with employees, and they're like, that's really not that important. It's costing us a couple of hours a week or a month or
Sure.
whatever, and we don't want to do that. Now they realize like, whoa, if we streamline things, if we make the operations around the people side a little bit, better, smoother, now we can actually have more time to do culture committee related activities, following up on engagement, training and development, leadership development, and things that are really important that matter, that
Hmm.
actually have a better overall positive impact. So what I think this is doing, and what I'm seeing in general, is organizations are realizing how important the strategic aspects of HR that can get high return are happening for organizations, and more investments being made there, which I think is a positive thing.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see um, the first reactions of people in any kind of crisis or pressure situation, and I've always believed that people get better the longer they think about something, but that first reaction is usually who they are at their core. It's kind of like it's that initial response, right?
Yeah.
And I think you get some of that from companies as well. And I'm always there are a few companies out there. One that I can think of right off the top of my head um, that just intuitively seem to know how to respond in this environment, and as such has ginned up a lot of employee engagement and a lot of I think loyalty back to the organization because of how they responded to it. And I hope those companies who maybe weren't as prepared, um, weren't as uh, uh, bold, maybe is the way to say it, in dealing with this. I hope that they're able to take some of those lessons that they've learned. So we've only got a couple minutes here left. Final question for you. When you look at this entire year so far,
Yep.
at 2020, we're now into August of 2020. When you look at this time and the lessons that you've learned as a business owner and someone who leads a business, and seeing companies where you're dealing with other leaders, what's the one critical lesson that leaders out there need to learn from this? What's the one thing that if they could put it away in their head would benefit them in any situation that they see coming down the road in the future?
Yeah. So I mean, the one thing that I think is no, if you stress test your business, always be in a position where you know what the limits are in the event that something like this happens, or what the worst case scenarios are happen. Thinking about just from a pure, a CEO or a leader's responsibility is to make sure that there's a company to come back to. Realizing that you have to be able to stress test your business,
Mhm.
and those things that you unearth that maybe are don't seem urgent at the time but are important, that you really have to make time for those things always,
Mhm.
because you may not know when you might need those.
Mhm. Yeah, it's we had a few weeks ago, we had a gentleman by the name of Michael Herrera on. Michael is a continuity planning guy from a consulting firm out in Arizona. Really super smart guy, and one of those people that his whole life is continuity planning. And kind of to echo what you were saying, you need to plan even though you may not know exactly what it is you're planning for. There has to be some way to be able to put some structure around whatever your response
Sure.
is going to be. Jim, thank you so much, man. I have enjoyed getting to know you a little bit, and I have enjoyed our conversation today. I think that you bring a really unique perspective to this, and I would encourage other people to go out and check out Launchways. If you are a small business, if you're a medium-sized business, and you're looking for ways to rethink or reimagine your HR organization, Jim and his team would be great to help you. Jim, thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Ron, thanks for having me. Happy Friday. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. You take care now.
Yep. Take care. Thanks.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I think Jim's approach of taking a very humanistic, holistic approach to how we deal with benefits and perks and wellness programs for our team members will be critical in navigating a path back to some semblance of normalcy in the workplace when the COVID pandemic is over. I think one of the key takeaways here is that employees may not all reside in the same place. They may not be classified exactly the same way. But being able to provide an equal experience for everybody, regardless of location or classification, will be key to those companies that succeed going forward. Now, if you like what we did here today and you want to stay up to date, then like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice. Don't forget to turn on the notification button so you never miss any new content from us. Join us next week for another episode of Talent Unfiltered. Until then, stay safe.